This show does not constitute legal advice and is for educational purposes only. We are always available to field questions. However, until you have entered into a written agreement, your communications are not confidential and we are not acting on your behalf. Welcome. I'm Sarah Holland and this is Man vs. Land. Today we have Steve Whitman from Resilience Planning and Design, LLC as our guest. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Hey. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I've been in the state of New Hampshire now for 20 years, working with towns on planning issues through a range of jobs. I worked for the Lakes Region Planning Commission for a while. I worked for the state of New Hampshire at the planning office. And for the last now 15 years, I've been in private practice and have had this firm, Resilience Planning and Design, for the last 4.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And you're connected with the college in some way, right?
Yes, I also teach part-time at Plymouth State.
Excellent. All right, so tell me what resilience planning is.
So the reason behind forming this firm, Resilience Planning and Design, was to take the idea of community planning, long-range planning, and the land use regulations that implement those plans, and to bring a more sustainability, resilience component to it. So I also have a background in ecological design and teach courses in ecological design. And so it was to bring some of what we've learned in designing with natural systems to the planning work and to try to merge the two.
That sounds very interesting and complicated.
It's super complicated, but it's really fun because it gives you the dynamic approach that you really need to craft new solutions to more and more complex problems that communities face.
Right, and sustainability, you said that word. So that's kind of long range, making sure that communities are here for the long haul and that they support their inhabitants, their residents, right? It
is, and one of the issues we found with sustainability is it allows us to sometimes make our approaches greener, but not necessarily create long-term solutions. Okay. So it can be interpreted lots of ways, and so it can create greener options for doing things we're already doing, and in some ways can enable us to consume as much or to continue to make bad land use decisions or things like that. The idea of resilience, you still have that risk, but with a resilient approach, we're thinking about how natural systems are resilient and how after a forest fire or after a hurricane, they tend to bounce back faster than human landscapes do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now talk about, put it in like real life perspective. So can you share some of the projects that you've worked on in the past and how the practical application of what you do? Yeah,
absolutely. So typically what happens when we work with a client, towns are often updating their master plan when we get involved.
Okay.
And so every town in New Hampshire that has any kind of land use regulation has a master plan.
Okay.
It's required by state statute. And so the master plan, which is supposed to be updated about every 5 years, but often isn't,
right.
Is kind of this guiding document that says we, the citizens and property owners of town X, are going in this direction over the next couple of decades. And it's a place where they do a little bit of inventory of existing resources. So it could be natural resources, business resources, economic resources, things like that. So it's kind of a reading of the landscape of what's happening in our community now. It's the composition of a vision of where they want to go. In some cases, they don't want to change, right? They want to keep the rural character that we hear so much about. In other cases, they have specific initiatives, whether they're conservation related or economic development related or both. So we often get involved with that process, with the public outreach, engaging people in discussing it, and then crafting the plan, the inventory, and then the actions that are needed. And so that's one of the things we do. But that then needs to be implemented by regulations.
Oh, so that's another huge step in the process. Now, just to back up and to give folks a little perspective, so we're not living in the Wild West. There are rules and regulations that are set forth by the state and then by the towns, and then these plans are put in place. So there is a blueprint that every town is kind of living by, whether people understand that or not.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's really good for some folks to know, because I know that I get questions a lot about, who takes care of X and whose responsibility, and there's this unknown aspect, and there's really not a lot of unknowns, right?
No, and I mean, planning and zoning is stuff that most people don't have to deal with until they're building a house, purchasing land, building a house, starting a business. Maybe they interact with it a little bit, and it can be it can be boring
Yeah.
for a lot, right? It can also be really confusing. Like a lot of the way these documents are set up, they're set up to be legally binding and to provide guidance, but they're not necessarily set up to be user-friendly.
Right.
We're working on a project with Groton right now.
Okay.
And someone in the town of Groton put it really well. They said, they have a zoning ordinance. And they're just trying to have conversations around how that could change with their new master plan in place. How could the zoning change? And they started talking about the land use regulations as being a contract between neighbors. Because in a lot of cases, that's what regulations are, is they're you and I saying, okay, if we know that we support our town moving in this direction, which might be no change at all, or it could be specific initiatives that we both can buy into or at least support, what are we willing to give up as rights or compromise on as rights, and what aren't we? Like what do we want to possess as our bundle of sticks of rights for our properties?
Right. I think that's another very super important aspect, because folks usually only have one perspective, right? That they're like, oh, this is great, I can do X, Y, and Z. So moving into a town that has no zoning,
Right.
you're like, yes, this is amazing, I can do whatever. But so can your neighbor.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, so you're working with Groton. Tell me some of the interesting projects that you've worked with over the years. I know that there's a lot of talk right now about Franklin, which you're a part of, in some aspect, and that's very exciting to see their changes going on.
Franklin's really unusual. It's a lot of fun. So we got started in Franklin in 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And then in about 2013, 2014, we did some initial design work with a bunch of other folks from around the state of New Hampshire to kind of show how the mill yard portion of downtown Franklin could be re-envisioned as a more sustainable, resilient economic driver for the downtown. And so it was a matter of kind of looking at how that area had been disconnected from the natural systems and was creating kind of its own havoc environmentally. What was wrong with some of the economic systems there? Lack of housing, lack of jobs, some of the problems that we're aware of in Franklin and other places. And what that led to was getting a bunch of people to kind of rally around this new, greener vision, a really bold vision for a community that's struggling in a lot of ways. And over time, it got political support, business support, creation of now a couple of nonprofits who are working with the city, in some cases to do some of the things that the city staff don't have time for or don't have the bandwidth for. And so now it's at a point where buildings are being redeveloped, new businesses have started to move in. We're working on a design of an 8-acre park, which is along the Winnipesaukee River. They're also going out to bid right now for the creation of a whitewater park. So the Winnipesaukee River will get a bunch of cleanup that it needs from a lot of the industrial material from the mills that ended up in the river. And it'll end up with an amenity that allows people to access the river safer, and a range of people will be able to use it.
That's great. That's super exciting. I know a lot of folks like to raft that river.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool to have
really
kind of
cool.
really close to where we are. So you mentioned a couple of different agencies, and so you, when you're working on a project, you're kind of like the connector, right? You have a wide range of knowledge of how all these things work, and you're listening to the towns and the community, and you're trying to put all of this stuff together. So tell me a little bit about some agencies that you do work well with, that you have to maintain a good relationship with.
All the state agencies, which sometimes work on a different time scale than the rest of us. So we're working right now with Department of Transportation on some highway projects, and we're doing land use review. So we're helping be the in-between between the state agencies and the towns and the regional agencies. But also we do a lot of work with regional nonprofits. We've been working in the Newfound watershed for a decade now, and we're getting ready to do some more work there. And in that case, we're working with the nonprofit entity, the Newfound Lake Region Association, the individual towns, and any other players. Plymouth State's had a role at times, UNH has had a role at times. And we've done other regional projects like that. And those can be the most complex. We do really have that facilitation role that you mentioned. And getting a sense of what the different missions are of these organizations, how they operate, and they're quite different at the speed and complexity of which they operate, the oversight that they have.
Yeah. That's an interesting position to be in.
Yeah, it's fun actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet. And it probably could be frustrating at times,
Has
right?
its moments. Right.
So in looking at your website, which is resilienceplanning.net, right? So there's this one word that keeps coming up, and that's permaculture. Can you
Yes.
tell me a little bit about what that is and what it means?
It's a funny word, that permaculture. So permaculture, it came out of Australia in the 1970s, and it really was an understanding of how ecosystems operate and how humans can operate within their environment. And our environment is just an ecosystem, even though we've introduced, roads and other infrastructure, our homes and businesses. And what permaculture aimed to do was to plan for that higher level of sustainability or resilience. How can I operate within my local environment and be a good steward of my local environment, like a lot of landowners are attempting to do,
Right.
and maybe provide some of what I need, some of my food, some of my energy, some of my fun.
Yeah.
It's not all serious. And so permaculture started off as kind of permanent agriculture. How could I set these systems up so that they're perpetual? So the time I invest now pays off over a period of time. But nothing's really permanent.
Right.
And so permaculture has been helpful because what it actually gives us is there's a design process that we use that helps us read the land and understand the complexity of what's happening at any scale, whether it's a small parcel or you could do a whole town.
Right.
And then from there, match that to what are our goals in that spot to try to come up with a plan for action.
Yeah. So that's really ingrained in everything that you do.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's one of those things that you never master. Like, I feel it's one of those things I'll continue to work on and learn from for the rest of my life.
Great.
We've applied it on our property here in Plymouth for the last 15 years. I've applied it at the community scale, have friends who've applied it at the national scale for other countries. So it's scalable.
Very cool. Yeah. So tell me about your property here in Plymouth. I know that you have you participate in the brewing of some beer, right?
We just grow the hops. Yeah.
Well, that's participating, right? That's
I guess,
a major ingredient.
It is a major ingredient.
So obviously, you use your interests in designing kind of what it is that you do at your house and the things that you grow and scale. So that's really important when you take it out to other levels, right? The town and the community and the state and whatnot. It's what's important to the people that live there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you do a lot of listening, which is really great.
Yeah, and I mean, our property has been a place where we can address our own ecological footprint and have the fun of learning and trying things and meeting some of our own needs.
Yeah.
And doing that in a way that I think we'll leave the property to the next people in even better shape than the way we found it.
Yep.
Which is, I guess, kind of like the homeowner's dream, right?
Yeah,
That,
absolutely.
it may make it hard to leave at some point.
True.
But yeah, it's been great.
But an exciting venture to start again somewhere else. Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right,
potentially.
which is really cool.
Or have someone else pick up where we left off. And
Yeah. So what types, you mentioned state agencies, local communities, nonprofits that you work with. Is that the major, like the extent of the clientele that you have, or are there smaller entities that you work with?
Yeah, on occasion we'll work with a landowner or developer, but that's been a small amount of our work. And often it's just a matter of scope and time and like what they're looking for. And if there's somebody that's better suited to give them what they want, then we'll often make that recommendation and help them find that person to do that.
Great.
Yeah, we do some work for statewide nonprofits. We're doing some work for the Forest Society on a few projects right now. We do a lot of facilitation work too, like actual, not just project facilitation, but meeting facilitation. So that takes us to different places within and outside of New Hampshire.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. And I had seen before that you speak. You speak at events and
I do.
And very cool.
Yeah, I don't have a problem talking. I'm glad with time I now have things I can say that I can share. It's not just talking. But yes.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Are there any trends that you're seeing that communities, like a majority of your communities, are moving in X direction? Is there anything that you've just noticed?
It's been encouraging.
Yeah.
When we kind of put ourselves out there 4 years ago with this new firm, we weren't sure how that would resonate with people and whether people would relate it or whether they would want, just the same type of master plan they'd always had and the same type of regulations they'd always had. But I think what's been exciting is there's a lot of information out there that we're all wading through.
Right.
And people have started to figure out that the problems that are affecting the world are increasingly complex. And they're not linear, like that they pop up and disappear, and that they make other problems, sometimes more intense. So people seem to be looking for kind of stepping back, taking a different read of the landscape than maybe they ever did in their community before, and they're getting really creative with solutions.
Awesome.
And so I think as the economy changes, as people's job situations change,
Absolutely.
Where we work, the type of work we do, the landscape of the future is uncertain in lots of positive ways as well. And so it's made it fun to have to continuously problem solve with people in different settings with different sets of goals. So there's no there used to be you take the zoning or the master plan from one town and kind of swap the names was always the joke. And you can't do that, you could do that, but it'd probably be awful, and you wouldn't end up with the same kind of dynamic future that's possible. And I think communities like Franklin are a sign of that, really kind of abandoning biases and preconceptions and launching into something new.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you sound like you have a very exciting job.
I feel very fortunate.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very cool. You talked a little bit before we started that you could speak to how towns implement their land use rules or regulations, or how they come to be, and you facilitate in that. Can you talk a little bit kind of on the basic level of how that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And all this is accessible to property owners and residents because they're all public documents, and they're generally available on the town's website. And if for some reason the town doesn't have them on their website, they'd be available through Town Hall.
Perfect.
And we're hosted here today in the library. A lot of times these documents are available in libraries. So the basic document, which is kind of this overarching umbrella, is this master plan. So you can find your town's master plan and you can read through it and get a sense of what is happening. The planning board in each community is charged with creating that master plan and getting it adopted. And they're also charged with drafting and bringing to the voters land use regulations.
Right.
And so typically zoning, like the biggest land use regulation that we tend to think of, that has to go to town meeting. It has to go, it's a ballot voted item, so it has to be something that has the support of the town when it gets implemented. And it regulates dimensional standards, things like lot size and setback and frontage, and the things that dictate how big of a piece of land you need and what shape it needs to be and all those other things. But it also regulates uses. What kind of use can I have? Can I have a home business? Are there parts of the community that are designated for commercial uses, industrial uses, or things like that? So those documents are really good to consult, I think, if you're looking for property, so you have a sense of what you're up
Absolutely.
against and what, as you said, what the neighbor can also do in your area. And also just to know that you have the flexibility to maybe do some of the things you may want to do in the future.
Absolutely.
There are also subdivision regulations if you're actually dividing land, and I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with these. And those can vary quite a bit from town to town. And then there are site plan review regulations, which regulate non-residential development for the most part, unless it's a really large, like multifamily development. But it's typically used for commercial and industrial uses, and it's related to building placement and parking and access and things like that. The site plan review regulations and subdivision regulations have to be adopted at a public hearing, but they don't have to go to town meeting. So planning boards will often work on those and address problems within them more frequently than they will on zoning.
Okay. Yeah, which it makes it really important that as a community member that you pay attention to what's going on and give your input.
Absolutely.
Because you're part of the community, they serve you, so that's really important. And then also that the towns can only work within the regulations that the state allows them to work in.
Yeah.
So you also need to pay attention to what's going on the state level. And I'm on the public policy committee for the New Hampshire Association of Realtors, and we wade through so many pieces of legislation every year that have to do with land and homeowner topics. And some of them we know are just ridiculous and they're just going to go away. Others are really important for people to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I know last year we had the accessory dwelling unit
I was just
one.
thinking of that, yeah.
Yeah, and I know my town was not really in the know, and 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 we voted in something that probably wasn't the best for us.
Okay.
Ours was, you can have an accessory dwelling unit in your garage, as long as it's attached. So my neighbor can have one because he has an attached garage. I have the same size house and same size everything else, but my garage isn't attached, so I can't have one. So pretty bummed about that, but that just goes to, speaks to knowing what it is that you're voting on, which is
Right.
super important, because once that's in there, it's, literally an act of Congress to get it out. So, so that's really important. Any more thoughts on that process? Any suggestions for the community?
Yeah, I think it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I think looking at what's available through your town and if you have questions, talking with town staff.
Yeah.
Town staff are incredibly knowledgeable.
Very.
And the earlier you can talk with them, the more they can guide you and help you.
Exactly.
If you go and make decisions and build that accessory dwelling unit in the unattached building and it's against the town regs, it's hard for them to be able to give you a lot of relief. But
Yeah.
and I think getting involved, like you said, even if you don't want to serve on a planning board or board of selectmen or a zoning board or something, tuning in when they have had a hearing and they've had some kind of presentation on a development, showing up at a meeting.
Yep.
As a planning board member here in Plymouth, I mean, we like to see people sitting in the audience.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
shows that they value the work that we're doing. These are volunteers in our towns.
They are volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they put in a lot of time.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
Yeah, and they, they're serving their community, so it would be nice for us to participate in that and share with them our concerns or our questions, so then they have some guidance into what they're doing.
And
So-
questions, I think, is really important. We've had quite a few new planning board members come on this year in Plymouth, and it's overwhelming to get up to speed on what the state allows, as
Yep.
you said, and then what the town has adopted in the past and what we're
Yep.
thinking about working on. And I always encourage people, ask questions.
Yeah.
If we can't explain to you what we're doing and why, that's a problem. So ask questions and we'll
Absolutely.
figure it out together.
Absolutely.
And so I think that goes for the public as well.
Yeah, and it's a collaborative effort. It shouldn't be,
Yes.
and I know that a lot of towns and a lot of people feel that it's a very combative meeting to be a part of,
Right.
or process, but it really should be collaborative, because it is
Right.
your community and you should be, participating in what happens.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree.
yeah.
I think it's the formality sometimes of the hearings
Mhm.
can put people off and make them nervous.
Sure.
But 9 times out of 10, when I'm at a planning board meeting in a New Hampshire community and there's somebody there who has a question or is just coming for clarity on something, the board really likes doing those things. Because that's when they do get to help their neighbors, their residents. And they do try to, kind of roll back the seriousness to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've been, I've sat in front of planning boards and zoning boards before, on behalf of my clients.
Right.
And they're very helpful.
Mhm.
So it's you shouldn't feel like you can't do it or
Right.
inhibited by that at any
Right.
point. And also on this station, Pemmy Baker Television, they film the meetings in various towns and promote those. So you can tune in. You don't even have to go to the meeting to know what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's kind of nice.
It
And then
is.
always, like you mentioned, the records are there, the meeting minutes.
Right,
So
right.
you can always be in the know. But awesome. Any last thoughts before we wrap up, Steve?
No, this was fun to do. They're big topics.
Yeah,
And so I think
really.
it's nice to give people a little entrance into it and let them see that fun can be had and things
Yeah.
can be learned. And it took me a while to get up to speed on a lot of this, and I'm always
Yeah.
learning. And so if people are
Absolutely.
open to that, I
I
think we welcome them to be involved.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks for
And
having me.
We'll have you back again.
All right.
Thanks.
Sounds good.